Hello, my name is Shelby, and welcome to week 3 of your beginner yoga journey. In today's class, we're going to be going over plank pose, three-legged dog, and our step through. These are some common shapes and movements you'll see in a lot of vinyasa and hatha yoga classes. So if you're ready, join me on your mat in a tabletop position. So coming on down to tabletop, hands and knees, and just like we did at the beginning of this journey, finding that Hasta Bandha hand to earth connection. And you want to spread your fingers wide so you have a nice firm planted hand. So before we start to ask a little bit more of the wrists, I like to just give them some warm up. So you might take a few circles here to the right, kind of pouring the weight around the wrists as you move circularly. And then we'll do a few circles to the left. Pausing in the center, flip your fingers out to the outer edges of the mat so the inner wrists face each other, and we'll rock a little side to side, just to your own degree. It's okay if this movement is really small. We're just kind of warming up into the wrists. Good. And then one last thing here. We're going to bring the fingertips to face each other, palms face the sky. This one can be a little tricky, so if that's feeling that way to you, bend your elbows. This will help you. The straighter your elbows are, the deeper this will feel on the back of your wrists. And if you want to add on, again, you can rock a little bit side to side. You can also give your fingers a bit of a wiggle. Good. And then we'll just sit back to the heels, shake it out. All right. And we'll meet back up in tabletop position. Start to engage your core right away in this tabletop. So we're pressing the mat away from us, and we're finding a slight tuck of the tailbone underneath us so you feel the low belly activating. And we're not slouching in the shoulders here, but rather we're pushing up and away, creating space. So by now we might be getting more comfortable with having the weight going into our hands and learning how to support ourselves in this way. So I want you to notice how when I let my belly hammock out low, I'm kind of dumping rather than engaging and lifting up and away. So you want to find that before we even enter our plank pose. And then when you're ready, you can step one foot back and then the other. Adjust yourself as needed here. You want to find shoulders over wrists so we're not back here, but we're right up here. Notice if you're sagging in the hips. This is like a common tendency. We're just leaving the core behind when we do this. So I want you to hug navel to spine. Think of hugging the front body to the back body. Feel free to take breaks as you listen to my cues, but pushing the mat away from you, almost as if your hands could push through the floor or through the earth. We want to also think about our quads here. So we're igniting the front of the thighs. And we're, again, just lifting up and away rather than letting ourselves kind of sag in. And if you're someone who is still building the strength and core awareness to hold this shape comfortably, you can definitely modify lowering the knees. So this is different from a tabletop position. You'll notice that unlike tabletop, my knees are actually behind my hips, so I'm using my core a little more. This is a modified plank pose. My shoulders are still above my wrist, and I'm not allowing my belly to hammock out low, but I'm hugging my navel to my spine. And whether you're in the modified plank or the full plank, think of this action like a crunch. So your rib cage and your hip bones are cinching together. And this pose is a really solid strengthener for pretty much everything else you might do in yoga and in life. And I'll just give you one last little tip. I know we've talked a lot about not allowing our belly to hammock down low, but I also want us to be mindful that we're not letting our hips pop up too high. I like to call this a sort of sloppy down dog plank situation. And this is not what we're looking for either. So we're looking to find one straight line from the crown of your head to the heels. Now, like we've mentioned before, we're not typically used to putting the weight into our hands. So if holding plank pose felt like a lot to you, not to worry. You can give your wrists a few rolls. Sometimes I like to grab the place between the bones and kind of grip it here and give myself a roll like that. Really nice work, you guys. So I know we've gone over downward facing dog, your upside down V shape. Today I'm going to teach you guys three-legged dog. So this is when we lift one of our legs up into the air. And I'm going to encourage us to just try it out slowly because the leg of the foot that's grounded is going to start to get a big hamstring stretch, and we don't want to move too deeply too fast. So coming into downward facing dog, and just like we talked about when we first learned this pose, give yourself a few moments to just move. I like to bend and straighten one knee at a time, driving one heel at a time towards the earth. Never has to touch. And remember that your knees can be bent generously here if that allows you to feel longer through the spine and arms. Taking a few breaths to just settle in. And we'll find stillness in our down dog. When you're ready, full cycle of breath. Noticing if you're spreading your fingers wide and doing your best to ground into that area between index finger and thumb so the whole palm is firmly planted, supporting you. Keep pressing into both hands evenly, and then nice and slowly we'll start to inhale the right leg up towards the sky. So it doesn't matter how high you go, you'll notice the left hamstring's getting a big stretch here. And I like to encourage my students often to just bend that top knee and open the hip. And you might find some movement here. Maybe you circle through the hip. Maybe you circle the ankle. Notice if the left hand is kind of taking more of your weight. See if you can even that out. Both arms are strong, both hands are strong. And the idea is here to just kind of find what feels good at first. Just getting yourself familiarized, maybe even comfortable, if that's possible yet, here. And then once you've had enough of that, you can gently lower the right foot, and maybe you come down to the knees to just take a quick break. You might choose to shake out the arms. And it's totally normal if you feel like a sort of rush of energy coming back down. Downward dog is, in a way, an inversion. So give yourself a moment. And then we'll just try out the second side. So same thing, coming into down dog, ease your way back. We always like to do what we do on one side on the other, just so we feel that sense of balance and harmony. So when you're ready, with an inhale, we'll slowly reach the left leg up high. Good. Feeling that big stretch in the right hamstrings. Really push the mat away. So again, I'm not dumping in here. I'm not allowing myself to be pouring forward. I'm constantly trying to push myself away. And maybe you bend your left knee, open your hip. You might explore some ankle circles here. You might take some big hip circles. Just getting whatever degree of movement feels appropriate for you. This might look different on every single one of us. Pushing into both hands evenly. And then gently, when you're ready, left foot comes back to the earth. Release your knees to the earth. And maybe it feels good to shake the arms out or just give yourself a hug one way. Give yourself a hug the other way. All right, so now essentially we're going to combine our plank pose and our three-legged dog to learn our step through, which is a pretty common transition. I like to teach a lot in my classes. I find myself being guided into this transition in other people's classes. So this is stepping our foot from a three-legged dog up to the front of the mat. So we'll be shifting forward into a plank pose, and that Uddiyana Bandha that we discussed earlier in this journey is going to come in handy here, that navel to spine hugging up and in. And again, like we did in plank pose, really pushing the mat away from us. So we'll just do our best. This can be a little bit tricky at first, but practice makes progress, right? So meet me in your downward facing dog when you're ready. So this step through transition is a common way to enter those standing poses like warrior one, warrior two, high crescent lunge. Feel free to follow along or just watch along as I move through this, but we're going to start with the right side. So I'm pushing evenly into my hands, and with an inhale, I'll sweep my right leg up high, three-legged dog. Exhale, tiger curl. We shift forward, knee to nose. So I'm using my left toes, my back left toes, to help shift me forward. Just like plank pose, I'm pressing my hands away from the earth, and I'm hugging my navel to spine, my right thigh to my chest. With all of that happening simultaneously, I can take a clean step, right foot between my hands. Maybe I spin my back foot flat and I come up into a warrior two. All right, so we'll try that on the other side, coming back to down dog. And again, it's an inhale to lift my left leg up high, three-legged dog. Exhale, knee to nose, shift forward. We call it tiger curl. I'm using the right toes to shoot me forward, pushing my hands into the mat, hugging my left thigh to my chest. And I can take that clean step between my hands. Maybe I come right up into a high crescent lunge. Nice work. All right, so I know that transition can be pretty tricky, but the more that we practice having the weight in our hands, like in tabletop and in plank pose, the more comfortable we'll start to get with pushing through the hands to create the space that allows the foot to come through. So feel free to practice that a few times and see how it goes, but be patient with yourself and know that this is a journey, this is a practice, and it really doesn't matter how it's looking. But rather just notice how it's making you feel. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week for our fourth and final beginner yoga journey class.